is a conversation you have been avoiding. You already know what it is. You have been circling around it for weeks, maybe longer, telling yourself that the timing is not right, that you need more information, that maybe the situation will resolve on its own. But deep down, in that place where Scorpio always knows the truth, you already understand that silence is not protecting you anymore. It is suffocating you. And what makes this moment so different from all the others is that the energy surrounding you right now is practically demanding that you speak. Not with anger, not with blame, not with that sharp edge you sometimes use when you feel cornered, but with the kind of clarity that comes from finally being honest, not just with someone else, but with yourself first. This is the conversation that clears the air. And if you stay with me through this entire reading, you are going to understand exactly why this week, this window of time, is the one you have been waiting for without even realizing it. The universe has been setting this up quietly, moving pieces into place behind the scenes, and now, everything is aligned for the kind of truth that actually heals instead of destroys. But here is the part most people miss. The conversation is not really about the other person. It is about what you have been carrying alone for far too long. So let us begin, Scorpio, because what is coming in these next few minutes might just change the way you handle every important moment from here forward. Tip 1. The weight you have been carrying is not loyalty. It is avoidance dressed up as patience. Let me be very direct with you right now, Scorpio, because you deserve that. You have been telling yourself a story, a convincing one too. You have been saying that the reason you have not spoken up yet is because you are being patient. You are waiting for the right moment. You are being strategic. You are protecting the other person from something they might not be ready to hear. And on the surface, that sounds noble. It sounds like the kind of thing a deeply caring, emotionally intelligent person would do. But let me ask you this. Has the waiting actually made anything better? Has the silence brought you closer to resolution? Or has it just given the tension more room to grow? Because there is a very thin line between patience and avoidance, and right now you are standing on the wrong side of it. What you have been calling loyalty is actually fear. Not the kind of fear that makes you run, no, Scorpio does not run, but the kind of fear that makes you freeze in place and convince yourself that stillness is strength. You are afraid that if you say what you really feel, the whole thing might fall apart. The relationship, the dynamic, the image someone has of you. You are afraid that your truth might be too much, that it might push someone away, that it might confirm the thing you have been dreading, that maybe this connection is not as solid as you wanted it to be. But here is what the energy is showing me very clearly. The weight you are carrying right now is not protecting the relationship. It is slowly crushing it. Every day you stay silent about something that matters, you are not preserving peace. You are building resentment. And resentment, Scorpio, is the most dangerous thing you can carry because you carry it so well that no one even notices until it explodes. You have this incredible ability to absorb emotional pressure. You can hold things inside for months, even years, without showing a single crack on the surface. But that does not mean the pressure is not building. It just means that when it finally releases, it comes out in ways that are disproportionate to the moment. Someone says one small thing, and suddenly everything you have been holding back for 6 months comes pouring out. And then you are the one who looks unreasonable. You are the one who seems like you overreacted. When the truth is, you have been underreacting for so long that your system finally could not take it anymore. This is the pattern that has to break right now. Not next week. Not when you feel more ready. Now. Because readiness is not something you wait for, it is something you decide. And the energy around you this week is giving you something rare. A window where the other person is actually more receptive than usual. They might not show it on the surface. They might still seem guarded or distracted or caught up in their own world. But underneath all of that, there is an openness that has not been there before. The universe is not asking you to have a perfect conversation. It is asking you to have an honest one. There is a difference. A perfect conversation is one where you say everything right and the other person responds exactly the way you want. That almost never happens. An honest conversation is one where you say what is true, even if your voice shakes, even if the words come out messy, even if you have to pause and collect yourself halfway through. That is what this moment is calling for. And I need you to understand something important. The fear you feel right now is not a warning sign. It is a compass. It is pointing you directly toward the thing that matters most. Every time you feel that tightness in your chest when you think about bringing something up, that is not your intuition telling you to stay quiet. That is your soul telling you that this conversation is overdue. So the first thing you need to do before anything else in this reading even applies is stop confusing avoidance with patience. They are not the same thing. Patience is active. It has a timeline. It has a purpose. Avoidance is passive. It just keeps pushing the moment further and further away until the opportunity disappears entirely. And right now, you cannot afford to let this opportunity pass. Tip 2. The other person already senses something is off. You are not hiding it as well as you think. Here is something that might surprise you, Scorpio. Or maybe it will not surprise you at all because deep down, you probably already suspect this is true. The person you have been avoiding this conversation with, they already know something is wrong. They might not know the specifics. They might not be able to name exactly what has shifted between you, but they feel it. They feel the slight distance you have been creating. They notice the way you respond a little shorter than you used to. They pick up on the energy you bring into a room, even when you think you are masking it perfectly. Because here is the thing about Scorpio energy that most people do not talk about. You are incredibly powerful at controlling what you show on the surface, but the energy you emit is a completely different story. You can keep your face calm. You can keep your words measured. You can keep your behavior consistent. But your energy, the frequency you are vibrating at, that tells the real story. And the people closest to you, whether they are consciously aware of it or not, are picking up on that frequency every single day. Think about it this way. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt that something was off? Even though nobody said anything and everything looked normal? That is exactly what the other person is experiencing with you right now. They walk into your presence and something feels different. Something feels heavier. Something feels like it is being held back. And because they cannot quite identify what it is, they start filling in the blanks with their own assumptions. Maybe they think you are losing interest. Maybe they think you are angry about something they did. Maybe they think you are pulling away because you have found something or someone better. The stories they are telling themselves in the absence of your truth are probably worse than the truth itself. And that is the cruel irony of silence. You stay quiet to protect the relationship, but the silence creates a space where doubt and insecurity grow like weeds. The other person starts second-guessing everything. They start analyzing your text, your tone, your timing. They start wondering what they did wrong. And the longer you wait to address what is actually going on, the more complex and tangled their assumptions become. By the time you finally do speak up, you are not just addressing the original issue anymore. You are also having to undo weeks or months of misunderstandings that grew in the space your silence created. This is why timing matters so much right now. The energy this week is creating a brief window where the gap between what you are feeling and what the other person is perceiving is at its narrowest. They are more tuned into you than usual. They are more willing to listen. They are more capable of hearing something difficult without immediately becoming defensive. But that window will not stay open forever. If you let it close, the next opportunity might not come with the same level of receptivity. And here is the deeper lesson in all of this, Scorpio. You do not protect people by hiding your truth from them. You actually disrespect them. When you decide that someone cannot handle what you have to say, you are making a judgment about their strength without giving them the chance to prove you wrong. You are treating them like they are fragile, when in reality, most people are far more resilient than you give them credit for. The people who truly care about you would rather hear something uncomfortable than feel something unspoken hanging in the air between you. They would rather have a hard conversation than a fake peace. They would rather know where they stand, even if the ground is shaky, than keep walking on what feels like a floor that might collapse at any moment. So stop telling yourself that you are protecting them. You are protecting yourself. And there is no shame in admitting that, but there is danger in not recognizing it. Because the moment you see your silence for what it really is, a shield, not a gift, you can finally put it down and step into the kind of vulnerability that actually brings people closer instead of pushing them away. The other person is waiting, Scorpio. Not with anger, not with judgment, but with the quiet hope that you will finally let them in on what has been happening beneath your surface. Do not make them wait any longer. If what you're hearing feels accurate, imagine what could happen if you applied this energy intentionally for 21 consecutive days. That's exactly what the 21-day program in the pinned comment is built for. Daily guidance, focused direction, and real momentum. If you're tired of staying in the same cycle, this is your structure. Tip 3, start with what you feel, not with what they did. This is where most Scorpios get tripped up when it comes to difficult conversations, and I want to make sure you do not fall into this trap. When you finally sit down to talk, your natural instinct is going to be to lead with the evidence. You want to lay out the case. You want to explain exactly what happened when it happened, how it made you feel, and why it was wrong. You approach emotional conversations like a prosecutor presenting closing arguments. And while that level of precision is one of your greatest strengths in many areas of life, it is absolutely devastating in moments that call for vulnerability. Because here is what happens when you lead with what the other person did. They immediately go into defense mode. When you lead with feelings instead of accusations, you also give yourself permission to be imperfect. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to know exactly what you want the outcome to be. You just have to be willing to say, this is where I am right now, and I need you to know that. That is enough. That is more than enough. In fact, that kind of raw honesty is so rare in most relationships that it can completely transform the dynamic overnight. People are starving for realness, Scorpio. They are surrounded by polished presentations and careful performances all day long. When someone sits across from them and just says the truth without trying to control how it lands, that is when walls come down. That is when healing begins. That is when two people stop being opponents and start being partners again. Now, I am not saying you should ignore what the other person did. Their behavior matters. Their patterns matter. The things that hurt you are valid and deserve to be addressed. But the order in which you address them makes all the difference. Feelings first. Facts second. Solutions third. If you follow that sequence, you will be amazed at how differently this conversation goes compared to every other difficult discussion you have had before. The energy right now is supporting exactly this kind of emotional courage. The universe is practically holding the door open for you, Scorpio. All you have to do is walk through it with your heart in front of your armor for once. Tip 4. Do not rehearse, just decide on your intention. I know you, Scorpio. I know that right now, after hearing what I have said so far, part of your brain is already writing the script. You are composing the perfect opening line. You are imagining their response and then crafting your counter-response. You are playing out the entire conversation in your head like a chess match, trying to anticipate every possible move so you are never caught off guard. And while that level of mental preparation serves you well in many situations, it is going to sabotage this one. Because rehearsed conversations are dead conversations. They have no life in them. They have no room for surprise, for discovery, for the kind of spontaneous truth that only emerges when two people are genuinely present with each other in real time. When you walk into a conversation with a script, you are not really listening to the other person. You are waiting for your cue. You are listening for the line that triggers your next prepared response. And the other person can feel that. They can feel that you are performing instead of connecting. They can sense that this conversation was decided before it even began, and that makes them feel like their input does not actually matter. So instead of rehearsing what you are going to say, I want you to do something much simpler and much more powerful. Decide on your intention, not your words, not your argument, your intention. What do you actually want to come out of this conversation? And I mean really want, not the surface level answer, but the deep truth. Do you want to be right? Or do you want to be close? Do you want to win the argument? Or do you want to heal the wound? Do you want to prove your point? Or do you want to feel safe again? Because your intention determines everything. If your intention is to be right, the conversation will become a debate. If your intention is to be understood, the conversation will become a connection. If your intention is to punish, the conversation will become a war. If your intention is to heal, the conversation will become a turning point. Most people never think about their intention before a difficult conversation. They just react. They let their emotions drive, and their emotions usually steer them towards self-protection, which means attack or withdrawal. But you are not most people, Scorpio. You have the depth and the self-awareness to choose a different path. Before you open your mouth, before you send that text, before you pick up that phone, sit with yourself for 5 minutes and ask, what is my intention here? Write it down if you need to. Say it out loud. Make it real. And then let that intention be your anchor throughout the entire conversation. When things get tense, come back to your intention. When you feel the urge to go on the offensive, come back to your intention. When the other person says something that triggers you, come back to your intention. This is how you stay grounded in a conversation that has the potential to go off the rails. Not by controlling every word, but by staying connected to your purpose. And here is the beautiful thing about setting a clear intention. It gives you freedom. When you know why you are having this conversation, you do not need to control how it unfolds. You can let it breathe. You can let it surprise you. You can let the other person respond in ways you did not expect. And instead of panicking, you can simply check in with your intention and adjust accordingly. This is the difference between rigidity and strength. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Strength bends without losing its shape. You want to be strong in this conversation, not rigid. You want to be clear, not controlling. You want to be honest, not rehearsed. The energy around you right now is supporting this kind of intentional communication in a way that does not come around often. There is a groundedness available to you this week that makes it possible to stay centered, even when the conversation moves into uncomfortable territory. Trust that. Trust that you do not need a script. You just need a clear heart and an honest intention. That is more than enough to carry you through whatever comes next. Tip 5. Let there be silence in the conversation. Do not rush to fill every gap. This tip might be the hardest one for you to follow, Scorpio, and it might also be the most important. When you finally have this conversation, there are going to be moments of silence, pauses, gaps where neither of you is speaking, and your instinct is going to be to fill those gaps immediately, to clarify what you just said, to add more context, to ask if they understand, to keep talking because the silence feels unbearable. But I need you to resist that urge with everything you have, because silence is not emptiness. Silence is where the real processing happens. When you say something honest and vulnerable, the other person needs time to absorb it. They need a moment to move past their initial reaction and actually sit with what you have shared. If you keep talking, you rob them of that moment. You pile more words on top of words, and instead of letting your truth land with its full weight, you dilute it with explanations and caveats and qualifications. Think about the most powerful moments in your own life, the moments that really changed something. Most of them probably involved silence. The pause before someone said "I love you" for the first time. The quiet after receiving news that changed everything. The stillness of sitting with someone in a moment of grief where no words were necessary. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is often the deepest form of it. And in this particular conversation, the silences are going to be where the real transformation happens. When you say something true and then let it sit there, unrepeated, unqualified, unapologized for. You give it power. You let it fill the space between you. You let the other person feel the full weight of it without any cushioning. And that is terrifying, I know, because in the silence, you lose control of the narrative. You cannot manage how the other person receives your words. You cannot spin it or soften it or redirect it. You just have to sit there and be with whatever comes up. But that is exactly what makes it so powerful. The silence after truth is where trust is built. It is where the other person realizes that you are not performing, you are not trying to manage their reaction, you are simply being real. And that kind of realness creates a safety that no amount of perfect words could ever achieve. There is also a practical element to this that I want you to understand. When you rush to fill silence, you often end up saying things you do not mean. You start backtracking. You start softening your truth to make the other person more comfortable. You start adding phrases like, "but maybe I am wrong," or "it is not that big of a deal," or "forget I said anything." And each time you do that, you betray yourself. You take back the very truth you finally had the courage to share. Silence protects you from that. When you say what you mean and then stop talking, you give yourself no opportunity to retreat. Your truth stands on its own. It does not need to be dressed up or defended or justified. Just is. And there is an incredible power in that simplicity. Now, I want to prepare you for what the silence might feel like in the moment. It is going to be uncomfortable. Your heart might race. Your mind might scream at you to say something, anything to break the tension. You might interpret the other person's silence as anger or rejection or disinterest. But most of the time, silence after a vulnerable statement means the person is actually listening. They are taking it in. They are feeling their way through it. They are giving your words the respect they deserve by not responding instantly with something half-formed. Let them have that time, Scorpio. And let yourself have it too. Because in those quiet moments between you, something old is dying and something new is being born. The old pattern of control and performance and perfection is dissolving, and a new pattern of honesty and presence and genuine connection is taking its place. You do not need to force that process. You just need to let it happen. The silence will do its work if you let it. Tip 6. Be prepared for a response you did not expect. Now, here is where I need to get very real with you about something, Scorpio. You have already imagined how this conversation is going to go. You have a version in your head where the other person responds in a certain way, either positively or negatively, and you have already prepared yourself emotionally for that specific outcome. But what if neither version happens? What if their response is something you never considered? What if they surprise you? Because the energy I am seeing around this situation suggests that the other person has been doing their own internal work. Not necessarily in an obvious way, not necessarily in a way that you have noticed, but beneath the surface they have been processing things too. They have their own feelings about what has been happening between you. They have their own fears, their own regrets, their own things they have been wanting to say but have not known how. So when you finally open this conversation, you might discover that you are not the only one who has been holding something back. The other person might have been sitting on their own truth this whole time, waiting for permission to share it. And your willingness to go first, to be the one who breaks the silence, might be exactly the permission they needed. This could mean that the conversation goes deeper than you anticipated. Instead of being a one-sided confession where you share your feelings and they respond, it might become a mutual unveiling where both of you are laying things on the table for the first time. And that can feel overwhelming in the moment. It can feel like too much truth at once. It can feel like the ground beneath you is shifting, and you do not know where to plant your feet. But I want you to understand that this is actually the best possible outcome. When both people are willing to be honest at the same time, that is when the real breakthrough happens. That is when you move from a surface-level connection to something genuinely deep and unshakable. The problem is that Scorpio likes to control the flow of information. You want to reveal things on your terms, in your timing, at the depth you have chosen. When the other person starts sharing things you were not prepared for, it can trigger your need for control. You might feel exposed. You might feel like the conversation has moved into territory you did not authorize. You might even feel a flash of resentment that they have their own pain, as if their suffering somehow diminishes or complicates yours. But I need you to breathe through all of that. This is not about control. This is about connection. And connection requires surrender. Not surrender in the sense of giving up, but surrender in the sense of letting go of the need to manage every aspect of the interaction. Let the conversation breathe. Let it go somewhere unexpected. Let the other person show you a side of themselves you have never seen before. Because that is where the real magic happens. Not in the parts you planned, but in the parts that surprised you. The conversations that change your life are never the ones that went exactly according to script. They are the ones that veered off course and ended up somewhere you never knew was possible. So here is what I want you to do when you encounter an unexpected response. First, notice your body. If you feel tightness in your chest or throat, that is your control mechanism kicking in. Acknowledge it without acting on it. Second, keep breathing. Deep, slow breaths. This keeps your nervous system regulated and prevents you from going into fight or flight mode. Third, stay curious. Instead of judging their response or immediately trying to figure out what it means for you, just get curious about it. Ask questions. Seek to understand before seeking to be understood. The energy this week is creating space for the kind of honest exchange that most people never experience in their entire lives. Do not waste it by trying to control it. Let it be messy. Let it be real. Let it be whatever it needs to be. What comes out the other side of that messiness will be stronger than anything you could have constructed with perfect words and careful planning. Tip 7. Anger is not the enemy, but it is not the leader either. There is something about anger that Scorpio understands better than almost any other sign, and that is its raw, transformative power. Anger is energy. It is fuel. It is the thing that gets you out of bed when you have been wronged, the thing that drives you to set boundaries, the thing that makes you refuse to accept less than you deserve. And in many ways, your anger has served you well throughout your life. It has protected you. It has motivated you. It has given you the fire to walk away from situations that were no longer serving you. But in this particular conversation, anger cannot be in the driver's seat. It can be in the car. It can sit in the back. It can even speak up when it has something important to contribute. But it cannot steer. Because anger-driven conversations do not heal, they wound. When anger takes over a conversation, everything becomes about impact instead of connection. You stop trying to be understood and start trying to make the other person feel what you feel. You want them to hurt the way you have been hurting. You want them to see the damage. You want them to feel the weight. And while that impulse is completely understandable, it does not lead anywhere good. It leads to words you cannot take back. It leads to escalation. It leads to both people leaving the conversation more damaged than when they entered it. Now, I am not telling you to suppress your anger. That would be the worst thing you could do, Scorpio. Suppressed anger does not disappear. It mutates. It turns into contempt, which is the single most destructive force in any relationship. Contempt is what happens when anger goes underground and starts rotting. It is the eye rolls, the dismissive tone, the subtle cruelty that slowly poisons everything it touches. So no, do not suppress your anger. Acknowledge it, name it, even share it, but share it as information, not as a weapon. There is a huge difference between saying I am angry about this and acting angry about this. The first is a statement of fact. It is data. It gives the other person important information about your emotional state without putting them under attack. The second is a performance designed to intimidate or punish. And you know the difference, Scorpio. You know when you are sharing your anger honestly, and when you are using it to dominate a conversation. That self-awareness is your greatest asset right now. The energy around you this week is amplifying your emotional intensity. That is not necessarily a bad thing, because intensity is what gives this conversation its transformative potential. But intensity without direction is just destruction. It is a wildfire. What you want is a controlled burn, focused, intentional, powerful, but purposeful. Before you walk into this conversation, take an honest inventory of your anger. How much of it is about the current situation, and how much of it is accumulated from past wounds that have never been addressed? Because anger has a way of compounding. Something that might deserve a 2 or 3 on the anger scale can feel like an 8 or 9 because it is sitting on top of years of unresolved pain. And when that compound anger gets directed at one person in one conversation, it is not fair. It is not proportional. It is not about them anymore. It is about everything. So do the work of separating your layers before you speak. Ask yourself, what am I actually angry about in this specific situation? And what am I angry about from before that I have been attaching to this moment? That kind of emotional honesty is not easy. It requires you to look at yourself with the same unflinching clarity you use when looking at others. But it is necessary if you want this conversation to be a healing moment instead of just another wound. Tip 8. Do not make the conversation about changing them. Make it about being seen. This is perhaps the most important shift you need to make before walking into this conversation, Scorpio. And it is one that goes against every instinct you have. You want the other person to change. You want them to hear what you have to say and immediately recognize what they have been doing wrong. You want them to promise to do better. You want them to transform right there in front of you in real time as proof that this conversation was worth having. But if that is your primary goal, you are setting yourself up for disappointment, because people do not change in a single conversation. They just do not. Change is a process, not an event. And if you walk into this discussion expecting a transformation, you will measure the entire conversation by whether or not you see immediate evidence of that transformation. If you do not see it, you will conclude that the conversation failed, that you opened your heart for nothing, that vulnerability was a mistake, and then you will build your walls even higher than before. So instead of trying to change them, I want you to focus on something much more powerful and much more achievable. Focus on being seen. That is all. Not agreed with, not validated, not rewarded, just seen. Seen in your truth, seen in your pain, seen in your complexity, seen in the fullness of who you are, not the carefully curated version you usually present. When your goal shifts from changing someone to being seen by them, everything about the conversation changes. The pressure drops. The stakes feel different. You stop measuring success by their response and start measuring it by your own courage. Did you say what was real? Did you let yourself be vulnerable? Did you share without editing or censoring? If yes, then the conversation was a success, regardless of how the other person responded. This is incredibly liberating, Scorpio, even though it probably does not feel that way right now. You have spent so much of your life trying to control outcomes, trying to make people see things your way, trying to build cases that are so compelling, so airtight, that the other person has no choice but to agree. And sometimes that works. But it does not create closeness. It creates compliance. And compliance is not connection. Connection happens when two people are simply present with each other's truth, without trying to fix it or change it or argue with it. When you share your experience and the other person simply receives it without defending, without deflecting, without making it about themselves, that is connection. And when they share their experience and you simply receive it with the same openness, that is connection doubled. This week's energy is creating an unprecedented opportunity for that kind of mutual seeing. The walls that have been between you, the walls you both built for very understandable reasons, are thinner than they have been in a long time. You can feel the other person on the other side of those walls more clearly than usual. They can feel you too. All it takes is one of you being brave enough to step around the wall instead of talking through it. And that person, Scorpio, is you. Not because the other person is incapable of going first. Not because the burden always falls on you. But because you are the one hearing this right now. You are the one being called. You are the one who has been sitting with this feeling for long enough to know that something has to give. The universe chose you for this moment. Not to change someone else. Not to fix someone else. But to let yourself be fully seen by someone who matters to you. That is the conversation that clears the air. Not the one where you win. The one where you are real. Some people watch. Others transform. If you want to be in the second group, the 21-day guide in the pinned comment gives you a clear step-by-step process aligned with your sign. This isn't about waiting. It's about moving. Tip 9. Forgiveness is not a single moment, it is a direction you choose. Now I need to talk to you about something that might come up during or after this conversation, and it is a topic that Scorpio has a complicated relationship with. Forgiveness. Let me say right away that I am not going to tell you to forgive anyone. That is not my place, and honestly, forced forgiveness is not real forgiveness anyway. It is just performance. What I am going to tell you is something that might reframe the way you think about forgiveness entirely, and it starts with this. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is not a switch you flip. It is not a declaration you make one time and then you are done. Forgiveness is a direction. It is a path you choose to walk, knowing that some days you will make progress and other days you will feel like you are right back at the start. And that is normal. That is how real forgiveness works. The reason Scorpio struggles with forgiveness more than most signs is not because you are petty or vindictive, despite what some people might say. It is because you feel everything at such depth that the wounds are genuinely deeper. When someone hurts you, they do not just scratch the surface. They reach something fundamental in you, something that connects to trust, to safety, to your deepest sense of self. So when people casually tell you to just let it go, it feels insulting. It feels like they are asking you to pretend that something that reached your bones only went skin deep. But here is what I want you to understand about the forgiveness that might become relevant in this conversation. It is not about letting the other person off the hook. It is about unhooking yourself. Every time you hold onto a wound with that iron Scorpio grip, you are not punishing the other person. You are anchoring yourself to a moment in the past. You are living there, breathing there, making decisions from there. And the longer you stay anchored to that past moment, the more of your present it consumes. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is not about them. It is about you choosing to stop letting a past moment dictate your current experience. It is about saying what happened was real, it mattered, it hurt, and I am choosing to move forward anyway. Not because I condone it, not because it was acceptable, but because I refuse to let it define the rest of my story. Now, this conversation you are about to have might bring up old wounds that you thought were healed. It might crack open something you carefully sealed away years ago. And if that happens, do not panic. That is actually a sign that you are going deep enough for real healing to occur. Surface conversations do not trigger old wounds. Only conversations that reach the real stuff have that power. If you find yourself suddenly emotional about something that happened years ago, it is because this current situation is connected to that old wound in a way you maybe did not realize until now. And that connection is actually a gift because it means that by addressing what is happening now, you can also begin to heal what happened then. But remember, forgiveness is a direction, not a destination. You do not have to arrive anywhere specific during this conversation. You do not have to declare "I forgive you" before the discussion is over. You just have to be willing to take one step in that direction. One single step. And that step might simply be listening to the other person's perspective without immediately dismissing it. It might be acknowledging that they were dealing with their own pain when they hurt you. It might be recognizing that they are human and flawed, just like you, and that their mistakes do not erase everything good that exists between you. That one step is enough for now. The rest of the journey will unfold in its own time, and you do not need to rush it. The energy this week is softening something inside you that has been hard for a very long time. Let it soften. You do not have to protect every wound like a fortress. Some of them are ready to breathe. Some of them are ready to begin healing. And this conversation, as scary as it might feel, could be the opening that allows that process to start. Tip 10. After the conversation, do not immediately analyze it to death. This final tip might be the one you need to hear most, Scorpio, because it addresses something you are absolutely going to do after this conversation ends. You are going to analyze it. You are going to replay every word, every pause, every shift in facial expression. You are going to dissect their tone, reinterpret their responses, and second-guess your own words. You are going to lie in bed that night running the entire conversation on a loop in your mind, looking for hidden meanings, missed signals, things you should have said differently. And I need you to hear me very clearly right now. Do not do that, or at the very least set a time limit on it. Because post-conversation analysis is one of Scorpio's most destructive habits. You take something that was real and alive and human, and you drag it into the laboratory of your mind where you dissect it until there is nothing alive left. You strip the warmth out of a vulnerable moment by overanalyzing it. You turn a breakthrough into a source of anxiety by convincing yourself that you read it wrong, that you missed something, that the other person's words meant something different from what they appeared to mean on the surface. The truth is, Scorpio, sometimes words mean exactly what they seem to mean. Sometimes a conversation goes well and that is just what happened. Sometimes the other person was genuine. Sometimes the connection was real. Sometimes the breakthrough was authentic. Not everything has a hidden layer. Not everything requires investigation. And when you refuse to accept a positive outcome at face value, you rob yourself of the peace that the conversation was supposed to bring. Here is what I want you to do instead. After the conversation ends, give yourself 1 hour, just one, to sit with whatever you are feeling. Not to analyze, not to interpret, just to feel. Notice what is happening in your body. Is there lightness? Is there relief? Is there grief? Is there hope? Whatever it is, let it be there without turning it into a story. Let the feeling exist without needing to explain it or understand it or categorize it. Then, and this is critical, do something grounding. Go for a walk. Take a shower. Cook a meal. Put your hands in dirt. Do something that brings you back into your body and out of your head. Because your head is where the overanalysis lives, and your body is where the truth lives. Your body already knows how the conversation went. Your body already knows whether the connection was real. Your body already knows whether this was a beginning or an ending. Trust it. Trust your body more than your mind in the hours after a vulnerable conversation. Your mind will lie to you. Your mind will tell you that you said too much, that you should have held back, that you showed too much weakness. But your body will tell you the truth. And the truth is probably that you did something incredibly brave and something shifted because of it. Maybe not dramatically, maybe not in the way you expected, but something real happened between you and another human being, and that deserves to be honored, not dissected. The energy in the coming days after this conversation is going to be settling energy. Things that were stirred up during the discussion will gradually find their new resting place. Emotions that were raw will begin to cool. Perspectives that were shifted will start to solidify. And all of that takes time. You cannot rush the integration process any more than you can rush the sunrise. It happens at its own pace, and your job is simply to be present for it. So resist the urge to send the follow-up text analyzing what was said. Resist the urge to call your closest friend and rehash every detail. Resist the urge to go back to the other person and clarify something you feel you did not express perfectly. Let it breathe, Scorpio. You did the hard part. You showed up. You spoke your truth. Now let the truth do its work. Everything I have shared with you today comes down to one fundamental insight, Scorpio, and it is this. The conversation that clears the air is not about finding the perfect words. It is about finding the courage to stop being perfect and start being real. You have spent so long curating your image, controlling your narrative, managing how people perceive you, that somewhere along the way, you forgot what it feels like to simply be seen. Not the version of you that is always strong. Not the version that always has the answer. Not the version that never needs anything from anyone. But the real you. The one who is tired of carrying things alone. The one who lies awake at night wondering why it has to be so hard. The one who wants nothing more than to feel safe enough to put the armor down, even for a moment. That version of you deserves to be heard. And the person you have been avoiding this conversation with, they deserve to meet that version of you. Not because they have earned it, not because they are perfect, but because real connection requires real people, and you have been hiding behind your strength for long enough. This week, the energy is asking you to take a risk. Not a reckless one, not a dramatic one, a quiet, deliberate, deeply personal risk. The risk of honesty. The risk of saying what you mean without dressing it up in strategy or burying it under sarcasm. The risk of sitting across from someone and letting them see that you are not as unshakable as you pretend to be. And here's what I know about you, Scorpio. You can handle this. You have survived things that would have broken most people. You have walked through fire and come out the other side, not unscathed but undefeated. And this conversation, as heavy as it feels right now, is so much smaller than the things you have already overcome. You are not going to break. You are going to break through. The air between you and this person has been thick with unspoken truth for too long. It is time to clear it, not with a storm but with a single honest breath. Say what you need to say. Let them respond however they respond. And then let both of you begin the slow, beautiful, imperfect process of rebuilding from a place of truth instead of silence. You have already done the hardest part by listening to everything I have shared with you today. You have already shown that you are willing to look at yourself honestly, to question your patterns, to consider a different approach. That willingness is rare, and it is powerful. Do not waste it by going back to the old way. Do not let fear talk you out of what your soul is calling you toward. The conversation is waiting. The person is waiting. And the version of you that exists on the other side of this moment, the version who finally said what needed to be said, that version is waiting too. Go meet them. You have two options after this video. Close it and hope things shift. Or decide that the next 21 days will be different. If you choose the second, the structured 21-day transformation aligned with your sign is waiting in the pinned comment. The energy is already moving, the only question is whether you are.